We are starting. We have close to 200 participants. We are very happy to welcome you all on this morning to this webinar, Preservation of Digital Heritage in the Data Space, organized by the project J-Ark, European Jewish Community Archive, and its partners, Jewish Heritage Network, the Europeana Foundation, Panjanic, Keep Solution, and others. And of course, we'll be talking about heritage and about preservation and the data space and everything in between. Before we start, a couple of important notes. It's a 3 hours long webinar, and to find your way in it, please use the program, which is at your disposal, in the communication you got from us. The chat and the Q&A are the main channels to communicate with us. Please use them. They're being constantly moderated by our team, and there you can make comments and send questions to the speakers. We would like this event to happen in a polite and respectful manner. So please consult Europeana's rules for inclusive conversations, and they are also posted in the chat. And now you can see them. So here we go. My name is Pavel Katz. I'm the founder and director of Jewish Heritage Network, and I'll be moderating the first and the third session of today's event. Let's see that the screens are moving a bit slower. So first of all, I would like to talk about the framing of this event. In several weeks, we're going to conclude the J-Ark project, which we started almost 2 years ago. You will hear everything about the project in a couple of minutes. But when we started, we knew little about data spaces. And now we know that data spaces are the next big thing in European digital infrastructures, now and in the years to come. So it was very clear that as we want to organize this final event and to report to you about the project, we also want to use the opportunity to talk about some big questions about heritage and preservation, and put them, of course, frame them in the topic of the data spaces. What kind of big questions arise when the worlds of heritage and preservation meet? First of all, when you need to preserve a document for a municipality or another authority, you probably need to preserve it for some amount of years, maybe 5, 10, or 20. But what about a cultural artifact? Preservation often goes together with this qualifier long term. But how long is long in culture? Inclusivity is a central demand of society from today's cultural projects. A lot of heritage projects, especially about the recent events in the 20th century, simply cannot be complete without going to small collections, family collections, individual collections. How do we preserve those collections in the same way we ensure the preservation of big established mainstream collections? And scale and costs. How do we design and redesign the public digital infrastructures so that we have the opportunity to save on costs when we look at the entire ecosystem rather than a specific system or project? So these are examples of those big questions that we asked our speakers today to reflect upon as they will be talking to us today. And now we're starting the first session, which is called Setting the Scene, listening about projects and initiatives which are already being in the works. And our first speaker is Alexander Aginsky, my friend and colleague that I'm very happy to introduce. Alex, you can take control over this slide. Meanwhile, I will introduce Alex. Alex is working as technology lead in Panjanic. He has more than 2 decades of experience in complex software projects and specialization in machine learning, natural language processing, and AI. Alex, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Pavel, for the introduction. It's been a wonderful morning to be here with you. And I'll tell you briefly about our project, the J-Ark that Pavel described in a few words, and I'll go a bit deeper. So the project started about a year and a half ago, and our vision was to basically connect 3 major building blocks of the European Commission funding. So these building blocks are e-archiving, basically responsible for the archival standards and long-term preservation in Europe. There is Europeana, the main digital European initiative for the digital culture, which access, aggregates, maps, and distributes heritage collection and e-translation. The European initiative to collect, build, and make available the machine translation and anonymization engines. So the target audience for us was the heritage archives, but the small and medium-sized ones, the ones which are usually underserved by the big initiatives like national libraries. All these long tails of the small and medium-sized archives, and we tried to make the end-to-end system. Basically, is that the archive comes to us with the collection, and it receives all the services. So from the digital, sending digital objects and continuing with the filling or aggregating the metadata. And we'll see how it connects to the future vision of the European Commission, the data space. So the project itself, few numbers. So we started in September 2019, and we finishing the project in about a week. So the total budget is about 400,000 euro. The partners are coming from different countries of European Union and bringing each own specific expertise. So Panjanic, the company I'm working for, is a Spanish company for machine translation and AI services. So we brought our connection to the e-translation. Then Jewish Heritage Network from Netherlands, as an accredited aggregator of Europeana, brought the connection to Europeana and its aggregation system. The KEEP solution brought the RODA. Europeana was our main validator. And the Brama-Grodska Theatre and Jewish Community of Lithuania are our content partners, which provided content for the archiving. Sorry, there was a comment. If everybody clearly hears me, okay. So then I'll continue. So just briefly, the product. So we basically cover all kinds of needs of small, medium-size heritage collection. We provide services to share and ingest the collection itself, publish collection and its metadata, then publish it to Europeana as an example, but it can be published to other platforms, and suite of long-term preservation following the J-Ark standards of European Commission. And so it should be, we specifically put emphasis on multilinguality and ease of use of training materials. So I'll go very briefly into architecture. So the archives comes and sends the digital objects to RODA. This is the preservation solution, which serves also as a IIIF server. Then the metadata is sent to aggregator, which updates the RODA with its metadata. And then there are multilingual machine translation and anonymization services, which are connected to aggregator. And finally, the data is published to Europeana. So a preservation service is open source system called RODA, developed by the KEEP system, which supports all J-Ark standards. It can be, there is a client which can be used to upload the digital objects, or SFTP is also an option. So it includes IIIF and the monitoring stuff. And as a part of the project, we added support for the European data model, the main format for the linked data in Europe, for the metadata. So metadata aggregator is provided by Jewish Heritage Network. It's called Judaica Europeana. It was developed in a few different projects before that, and supports all kinds of digital heritage formats, Mark 21, Dublin Core, EDM. And all of them are mapped to Europeana. And again, it's also based on the open headless CMS framework. And then Panjanic brings the AI content services, which are nearly human quality machine translation supporting all European languages, and then anonymization as well. So it was developed by Panjanic in different projects like Adaptra, Europeana Translate, and Mappa. So just quickly how it looks like in life. So you have the EDM transformation. So this is how Europeana data model looks like. It's a XML-based format for those who don't know. This is the original format, and then this is the translated format. So you see the DC title field is now multilingual. And then we have an anonymized version where the sensitive named entities were removed. And we store all three versions of this metadata. So, and just a couple examples of how it looks like with the real data. So this is the Lublin's data coming from the Brahma Grodska. So this is how it looks on their website. This is how it looks in Roda. So it's already, as you see, anonymized, and we store the digital object itself. And then this is how it looks on Europeana portal. And the second example is for Lithuania Jewish community. So they brought us the series of videos. This is how it looks like in their CMS system. Then this is how it looks in Roda, in the preservation system. Again, you see the anonymized version of the metadata and the digital object video in this case itself. And then the same video is on Europeana portal. So we provided the fully multilingual suite of the training materials, which is now it's translated to 6 languages, but by the end of the project will be translated to all 24 European languages. So summary, the uniqueness of this project is connection between the 3 building blocks, Europeana, e-translation, and e-archiving. As far as we know, this is the first project that basically integrates between all of these building blocks, and it's pretty unique. And we have vision that this should be one solution for small heritage organizations. So if there are any organizations which are interested to try it, you can see the pricing model on our website. So you're welcome, and the future speakers will tell you how it integrates with the European data space. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, for the presentation. And we have one question from the audience about the other data formats and application profiles. Is it possible to map with this system other application profiles to EDM and further on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the aggregator of JHN is very, very extensive, and it can be customized very easily to new formats if needed. But most likely we already support in this format, as we integrated already a lot of different formats across the digital heritage industry.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Now we are going to our next session, in which Arpad Welker will tell us about the e-archiving initiative of the European Commission. Arpad, please request the control for the slides. And meanwhile, I'll introduce you. Arpad is policy officer at the European Commission. He participates in the data space teams for tourism and also deals with e-archiving. Please, Arpad, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak. I also would like to greet all the listeners. It's a strange setting after all these pandemic years not to see the faces of the audience, but I know you are there, and I'm very happy to for the possibility to talk to you. I would like to add one sentence to the presentation Pavel gave about me, and it's that 15 years ago, actually, 15 years ago, I had a very minor role in the Hungarian archival system when we tried to tackle the digital archiving problems of the country. And after 15 years, I came back as a policy officer to see archiving, and it's amazing, really, how much and what has happened in between. Okay, sorry. There we are. And it's not an important aspect of this. I just wanted to add this little thing to the history of e-archiving, because the beginning of e-archiving, the roots are a bit there, because the first realization that the need of a European standardized solution for digital archiving came from some national archives which struggled probably the same way as we did with the problem. So e-archiving as a project has gone through various iterations that were founded that has been founded by the European Commission. First, even as an FP7 grant, and then e-archiving was a building block under the Connecting Europe facility. We heard the term building block in the previous presentation too. Here it is in a slightly or quite different meaning. Building blocks are a cross-border solution on the digital field, which can be reused to build public services, and the archiving was among those. And they developed a set of services which are, for the most part, continuing under the e-archiving initiative, which is under the Digital Europe program. But before I go to there, I would like to speak just very briefly about what is e-archiving. You are going to listen to hear other presentations which are going to speak more about the why, like why we need preservation, also more detailed description of the e-archiving initiative, but I also would like to say a few words about e-archiving. So what is e-archiving? We even have a definition. E-archiving provides core specifications, software training, and knowledge to help people store information for longer. Then there is also a central characteristics of e-archiving: interoperability, that following international standards and specifications, it creates interoperability. Openness and transparency, open specifications promote a high level of transparency. And then sustainability and legal compliance with the various national legal frameworks, especially. But then it might be helpful to have a look at what e-archiving is not. I would think that the first idea about an archive is storage, that it's a place where documents or records are stored. But e-archiving is not about hosting. It is a set of standards, libraries, best practices, and it may be used with any storage or cloud. It's not competing with the software sector, and it's not full consulting or adaptations. There is a support service, and we are going to talk about that later for sure. So e-archiving is now in the Digital Europe program. What is digital? It's a new funding program. It's a key element of funding schemes to promote the vision of the European Commission called the Digital Decade, and to help make the data strategy work in practice. So there was a procurement, we published a tender, and after careful evaluation, this current consortium was selected during last summer, and the e-archiving initiative started in 2022 October. It's important to highlight that the purpose of the e-archiving initiative isn't directed simply towards archives. It is a full digital preservation offer, and then one of the most important characteristics is definitely data sustainability from design. And it is compatible and interoperable with EU standards. These are the former building blocks: e-signature, e-delivery, e-ID, which can be mentioned here. Okay, so what the Commission aims at with the archiving in digital. So to foster the availability of data for use, the Commission's vision is a Europe where data flows unhindered in a safe manner and provides opportunities to businesses and citizens. So that is the context where the availability is seen. To strengthen data sharing mechanisms, as there are several possible obstacles which hinder data from being accessible, and data sharing is something that we try to strengthen. Improve technical, semantic, organizational, and legal interoperability, to simplify data exchange, and complement other services of the Digital Europe program, providing them with means to preserve their data in a transparent, secure, and sustainable manner for the future reuse. There is a European approach to data that the Commission wants to promote on every level. And interoperability of data will ensure reuse and sustainability in the long term. Now, what are the tasks of the contractor? So they have to build on the results of the existing previous projects and the e-Ark specification. We would like to maintain what has been achieved during these last iterations of e-archiving. It's important that they are still in use and that they are developed. So specification maintenance and development is one of the central aims of the project. Even new specifications are foreseen. Validation and conformance testing, one of the tasks is to, well, the J-Ark project is one of those projects which seek conformance with the specifications, and there are other institutions which are compliant with the archiving, and validation and testing of these are among the tasks of the projects. Training, as previously there were webinars, there are new webinars in the making. They are developing a curriculum. Outreach is an important part. We are coming to that later. Also, support for those who are already using. They have to build synergies within the digital program with the formal building blocks, with the data spaces. We are talking about the cultural heritage data space today, which is the one which is most closely related to the e-archiving project. And then onboarding is the process by which new users are gotten on board with e-archiving, and also they have to support and validate the generic services projects, one of which is J-Ark, exactly. So talking about outreach, there are several ways. As you see, webinars are forthcoming, as well as workshops. There is a LinkedIn group you see the link to on this slide, and we have a new website. Those who know the old website, actually the content at the moment is quite similar, but it is under development. Also, we are going to have, I hope very soon, a new page on those institutions which are conformant or compliant. And there is also the Twitter. Now to conclude, the e-archiving generic services project started to run already in 2021. So if I had followed the chronological approach, which I started with the first slide, I should have spoken about this one earlier, but I think it's better to put it here. So it's not just the main project that has been funded by the European Commission, but also for generic services project under CEF, the Connecting Europe facility. J-Ark has been presented of them. They all seek compliance with e-archiving. That's one of their tasks and purposes. And as you see, they also test other usages of digital archiving. And that's for my contribution. And thank you for listening to me. And I wish you a good seminar, workshop, and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arpad, for this interesting presentation. I have one question to you. The ambition is for the e-archiving initiative to cover very different kinds of data, from health on one side to heritage on another side, and the requirements could be very, very different. What is the challenge about having one set of specifications and standardization initiatives covering this wide range of types of data?
Well, I I think we have later on we have a presentation from the e-archiving site, so I wouldn't speak for them. I think they are better equipped to answer these questions.
Okay, thank you, Arpad. And in our third session, Fulgencio San Martin will talk about the data space for cultural heritage. Fulgencio, please take control of the slides. And meanwhile, I will introduce you. Fulgencio is a policy officer at the Digital for Culture Unit of the European Commission. And he and his team are responsible for the data spaces for cultural heritage and for tourism, and also is involved in the e-archiving initiative. Please, Fulgencio.
I was trying to unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So I am part of the team here in the European Commission for the Data Space for Cultural Heritage, which means also the team for Europeana and of e-archiving, the e-archiving initiative from both teams. So what I'm not going to do is to present the data space itself from the point of view on Europeana, from the point of view that we have already presented, for example, in the Europeana conferences, and also Valentin will do it herself in a moment as soon as I am done. What I'm going to talk is about the data space from the point of view of preservation and how e-archiving might help, e-archiving that was presented by Arpa a moment ago. So sorry, I'm working with two sets of slides here. So the main policy behind the data space is the recommendation that we from the Commission address to the member states about a common data space for cultural heritage. The question is, why do we even preserve? We preserve to avoid losing memory, to be able to reconstruct, good morning, Ukraine, and also to avoid repeating errors. Remember the repeating errors, please, because I will come back to it in a moment at the end of my presentation. So this is the first known written reference to the need of preservation. It was 24 centuries ago. Thank you very much for the Timaeus text, for the translation to Marinos Ioannidis. He is the chair of UNESCO and the Cyprus representative at the expert group for the European Data Space for Cultural Heritage. And we preserve what? The President, Ursula von der Leyen, said in the recent State of the Union that 80% of what we store will never be used. She also said that we must be smart and not preserve everything. This slide is a very good example. In the 70s, a group of people from the NASA, led by Carl Sagan, wanted to communicate, eventually communicate, with any life form out there in the space. What is important here is that there was very little space on the space ship to put all the knowledge from the humankind. And the choice was very thoroughly thought. There was music, there were sounds, there were spoken languages, greeting in 55 languages. The question is, why 55 and not 200 and not 40? Which languages were chosen and which languages were not chosen? For what it's worth, that is the farthest archive that we ever created. It is almost a daylight farther from us, from the Earth, and it still works. And by the way, the instructions to use it are not in English, they are in a symbolic language, and all the instructions are there in the ship, along with the information. We shall preserve for the future. The recommendation in the first chapter defines digital preservation about the activities necessary to make sure that the digital objects will be understood, will be located, will be understood and can be used in the future. But how far in the future and what does it mean? The rule of thumb for archivists is this. Let's imagine that none of us will be here for example, in Europeana in 10 years, and a new team takes over. Will that new team be able to find the objects, to use the objects? Well, that's the key in digital preservation. Let's imagine that there is a new team and we will not be able to be there in order to tell them. That's the rule of thumb. If it works, if they will be able to use it, then it works. It is well preserved. Chapter 2 talks about the need for national digital strategies, but here I would like to say, as Arpad said, that for any kind of organization, there is a need for a digital strategy, for a need for a digital preservation plan. That is in the call. That was in the call for grants to which J-Ark applied, and that is true for any other organization. The other main focus of the recommendation were the targets. I'm not talking about the targets. We have been discussing that a lot. That is for the member states. But what matters here and what I would like to focus on is the next paragraph in the same point, in the same article as the targets. The paragraph said, member states should take the necessary measures to ensure that all digitized cultural assets referred to in the paragraph above are also digitally preserved. That is also in the recommendation. And preservation is not easy and it's not granted just freely. So let's have a look at what that means. In the third paragraph was the recommendation to mainly use European as the relevant standard to achieve interoperability at European level. But for long-term preservation, there are complementary standards, like, for example, e-archiving. My colleague Arpad was talking about them a moment ago. And I would like to present you here some errors that we did in cultural heritage preservation during the last 30 years, particularly in 3D, which was also a particular focus for the recommendation. So thank you to Albert Sierra from the Giravolt project in Barcelona for the information, for the pictures, and from the experiences. Here it goes. In 1992, there were the Olympic Games in Barcelona. The Giravolt was already there doing some 3D scanning of cultural heritage, particularly of this monastery of Ripoll. And they did some captures from 2D photographs taken from different places, and they did 3D reconstruction with particular software and hardware. Mind you, this was before internet. We are talking about 92. Before 92, of course. For sure, that was proprietary hardware, that was proprietary software that is completely unusable today. We cannot use it. We go on in time, 13 years after. In 2005, there was the 3D capture of the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Mar in Barcelona, to check if there were deformations on the structure of the church. As of today, we have no metadata from that 3D capture. The files that are available, and there are not many of them, are open in a wish me good luck basis. There is no documentation on how the captures were done. There are some migrated files, and that is the only usable data today. Actually, more of the delivered maps were 2D dimension maps that were in paper. It was 2005, you know. Another shift to the future, 12 years after, so 2017, and there was a 3D virtual exhibition with captures from an Iberian village that was over 2,000 years old. That village is called Ullastret, that is in Girona, near the border, near the sea and near the border of France. And there were a lot of expositions to halls with reconstructions. There were videos, there were even extended reality expositions. The software used is still used today, so we know it very well. But the problem is that that software from 2017 has been updated over 30 times in 5 years. There were two problems here. The software, of course, was proprietary. The standards were almost nil because there were no standards at the time. There are still no standards, by the way, but that is another issue that we will be discussing a lot during the upcoming years. And therefore, at some point, the software was not compatible with previous versions. And you know when that happens, that happens very often. So the files were never migrated, so you need to migrate the files every time, and there were 30 times. And you cannot do that every day, but you must plan for that. So nowadays the files can be located. Some geometry can be maintained from some files, but the illumination, for example, is all lost. So 5 years, no migrations, mostly unusable. What is my conclusion? The conclusion is that preservation is not equal to digitization. Digitization is just one step in preservation. There was this phrase, we can preserve it by digitizing it. That phrase comes from the Notre Dame fire in Paris 4 years ago already. The idea that the scanning is preserving, that is not correct. You need a full plan, you need standards, you need to document the whole preservation, you need to know what actions must be done, what migrations, when to do those migrations. And all that is also present in the recommendations. So please read it carefully, please. And that was my presentation.
Thank you very much, Fulgencio. Thank you very much. And we will continue discussing this subject with you also in the third session today in the open panel. And our fourth speaker in this session is Valentin Charles from Europeana, that will speak about a subject which is extremely interesting to all of us, the data space for cultural heritage. While Valentin is taking control of the slides, I'll shortly introduce her. Valentin has been working with Europeana since 2009, and now she is the Data Services Director there. Please, Valentin, the virtual floor is yours.
Pavel, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for all the presenters so far. I think it's nice, a nice progression, and thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. So yeah, today I wanted to give you some insights on the activities related to the data space for cultural heritage, and maybe more specifically starting to highlight some activities that may be relevant in the context of preservation. So let's dive in. So Europeana Foundation and its consortium partner have been tasked to deploy the data space for cultural heritage that will support the digital transformation of Europe cultural heritage sector, and also foster on the creation and the reuse of content for cultural and creative sectors. So together with the partners and also the broader Europeana Network Association and the Aggregator Forum, we are working towards those objectives. The data space for cultural heritage is in fact one of the 14 data spaces that are planned to be deployed, with also a data space support center and a data space technical infrastructure that are there to support the deployment of those different spaces. So this is a bit the context we are operating in. The recommendation of the member states, as presented by Fulgen, are very much embedded in the activities we are doing. It's true that in reality we are focusing on maybe different recommendations than the one specific to preservation. So you can just see here on this slide what we are kind of focusing on, which is activities around the digitization of 3D, the fact that we should continue to support the awareness of the cultural heritage sector, etc. But it's true that preservation is not really our focus. So nonetheless, I think there are many activities we are doing that can contribute to it, and this is what I want to speak about now. So first, what about data quality? For me, looking at all the objectives of preservation as they have been introduced this morning, I think data quality is essential. I mean, if we want to be able in the future to find back digital objects and to be able to use them, we need proper documentation, just as Philgen just said. So what we are starting with, we have a large data set of around 58 millions of cultural heritage objects, for which the quality of the metadata and the content has increased a lot in the past 3 years, as you can see on those graphic. And this improvement of data quality is mostly due to the work that has been done by our partners, so the 40 accredited aggregators we are working with, that have contributed to this general effort of improving data quality. An important aspect of data quality we have been monitoring for several years. It relates to the availability, the accessibility, and somewhat the persistence of the data we are providing access to. And for me, I mean, maybe I'm not an expert in preservation, but for me, preservation is in fact starting there. So making sure that the data that we are publishing online remains accessible. That's why you can see a lot of effort have been put in reducing the amount of broken links we have in the data set. This has been a focus, and I think in a way it contributes to thinking, improving the data so that also if they need to be preserved, they are in a good shape. In terms of infrastructure, so what are we going to do for the data space? And I'm highlighting here only a couple of activities. Maybe it's a bit far-fetched, but in terms of the work on the infrastructure, so we are not putting in place a preservation strategy, but in a way we are implementing best practices when it comes to the management of the data and the management of the system. So putting in place disaster recovery mechanism, failover mechanism. So even if the way we work on these things are more coming from concept used in system architecture, in a way they are very similar approach that I think can already help us maybe in the future moving towards developing activities towards preservation. What we will be doing as well, and we have already started, is thinking about a way to increase and improve the permanence of the persistent and the permanence of the data that are made available within the data space. So this will materialize into the development of a policy and recommendation around persistent identification of resource, specifically digital object, which will help to make sure that all the objects all the data that are shared within the data space are identified in a persistent manner. And again, I think this work around standardizing and having those recommendations around persistent identification can contribute to the further development of a preservation strategy within the data space. This work, of course, will have to be implemented as part of the core in infrastructure. So here you can see the aggregation pipeline that has also been used as part of a J-Ark use case. So of course, all this work that will be done, for example, around persistent identifier will have to find its place into some specific implementation around the infrastructure we have already in place. This work, activities around those developing those recommendations and policy is part of a larger set of activities around data governance. So we will be doing a lot of work around providing all the conditions that can guarantee that data to be preserved are in fact have good condition for reuse and accessibility, which is also something that I think is a condition and needs to happen before we think about preservation. So defining all the conditions so that data can be shared properly, that they can be reused against clear condition is also something we are going to focus very much in the next 2 years. These mechanisms around data governance are finding their implementation and their maintenance as part of key frameworks that have been also mentioned by Filgen. We have several frameworks that we are using to maintain so clarify those recommendations and also provide implementation mechanism of it. For example, the Yopana data model is an important pillar. It was mentioned earlier as part of the presentation of the J-Ark work. So, for example, within the data model used by Yopana, you can see, for example, mechanism around data provenance, or having mechanism to specify the provenance of the data, which again are things that I think are important in the context of preservation. What are the information we capture and how we capture it, so that whoever will reuse these data or find them in the future can also understand how they were, where they come from, and how they were produced at the time. And all these frameworks and standards need, in fact, to be worked on at different level, and needs to cover also different type of data. As we are deploying the data space, we now need to accommodate very different type of data. 3D will be focused, and indeed, as shown by Filgen, it's an example of very complex objects that will need to be preserved, and the complexity in a way is also a challenge. But we have also different types of data, such as enrichments, translation, transcription, subtitles, that enrich the data we are publishing, and in a way you could argue they have as much value than other data, and also maybe deserve to be preserved together with the digital the metadata and the digital object. So we need to, whatever we developed in terms of framework, it needs also to accommodate this diversity of data. To do this, one of the key pillar of the activities we will deploy as part of the data space relates to capacity building. So in a way, it's what is being done today with this event. So together with the Yopana initiative and the partners, so we want to develop a program of training, also a program of events that allows the development of capacity on some topics within the sector. So preservation was maybe not a focus point on the radar, but looking at the interest in this event and in the topic, maybe it's a good sign that we should also consider preservation as part of those activities. And then lastly, the last pillar of what the data space is doing is developing digital services for the public. So the idea of the data that are being made available through the data space is also to be findable and reused by the European citizens. So this can be done via service such as the Yopana website, but also through other mediums. And the data is in fact, getting curated, get enriched through other types of activities. For example, the developments of virtual exhibitions. So here you can see the list of the kind of topics we have covered through virtual exhibitions that are also highlighting digital object with then some curation around it. You can also see that a lot of those exhibitions are being translated, which is also additional data that are produced. So yeah, it means that also, as you can see throughout this presentation, the amount of data and content we are producing throughout this development of this increase of the digital transformation of the sector means that also the amount of data and content that we may want to preserve is increasing exponentially, which raise an interesting question in terms of sustainability, but also the sustainability of a preservation strategy for the data space, because I mean, those are questions that we will continue to be discussing today, but what kind of data we should preserve, what is important, and as you can see, yeah, it can become quite massive. So it adds a new dimension to this question. So yeah, that was it for me. I hope it offers a bit of an overview. I know that it might be still a bit far from the core topic of preservation, but I think all these elements are good things to keep in mind as we are progressing towards the development of a real strategy for preservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentine. I think this is great news that preservation can be considered as part of the offering of the data space for cultural heritage. And we will discuss this in more detail in the third session. But meanwhile, I have a short question to you. With a lot of work going on in the data space for cultural heritage, what do you mind is the main difference between Europeana operating as a DSI, digital service infrastructure, and Europeana operating as a data space for cultural heritage?
So yeah, I think the main difference is that we we are looking at the full ecosystem. So I think what is important is also to expand our view and how we are looking at the cultural heritage sector, whether it's in terms of the type of data, the type of content, the type of reuse of the data. And I think all this work that I've mentioned around developing the conditions around the reuse of the data, but also some more technical principle, some kind of rule of engagement within the data space is the main difference. We are not only thinking about conditions that relates to the Europeana services, but also conditions that are a bit broader, and that should help us to all work together within this space, and also making sure that yeah, we can all benefit from the work that we are doing, and that this space is very inclusive and interoperable.
Okay, thank you very much for this answer, and we will meet you again in the third session. And well, before we go to break, first of all, I would like to say that we are happy to see more than 200 participants in this webinar. We're very happy. We think that it means that the subject is of interest to you. And before we go to break, I would like to do two things. First, I would like to introduce the moderator of the next session, Luis Faria. He'll be moderating the second session. Welcome, Luis. Luis is the Research and Innovation Director at KIP Solutions, a partner of the J-Ark project. Luis has worked in the past 15 years in research and development of solutions for digital preservation and information management. He has a PhD in computer sciences with specialization in digital preservation, and has been leading and participating different European projects in the area of digital preservation in the recent years. And second, I would like to turn your attention to the fact that we will be playing short videos during the break. And these video clips come from our partners in J-Ark. So these are Jewish heritage organizations, and they will tell about themselves, and they will tell about the potential of using the J-Ark or like-minded solutions. And in this break, we're going to hear two videos. The first one from Theater NN, Brama Grodzka, our partner from Lublin in Poland. And the second one will be from the Together Plan, our partner who are working on preserving of Jewish heritage and in Belarus.
Hello, my name is Emil Majuk. I work in Grodzka Gate NN Theatre Center in Lublin, Poland. We are a municipal cultural institution which deals with cultural heritage interpretation, mostly the heritage of Jews of Lublin and Lublin region. It is because our center is located on the entrance to the former Jewish quarter of Lublin. During last 30 years of our activities, we were able to gather a quite extensive collection of different photos, documents, oral history testimonies, and other resources connected to the Jewish history of Lublin and region, and other resources such as digital 3D models of historical objects. Thanks to participation in J-Ark project, we were able to improve the archiving standards of our digital resources and the quality of our metadata according to EDM model. We got access to new web-based cloud repository, which is compliant with e-archiving standards. And we exported the most valuable part of our collections, including photos, documents, and oral histories, to this repository. And last but not least, we published a selected part of our collections to Digital Library Europeana.
We're a non-profit organization looking to build a sustainable solution that will enable us to create a collection of heritage assets in a digital space. As we work on developments of our Jewish cultural heritage route through Belarus, we're discovering more and more as we build our global network. Across the world, we're now locating personal letters, family photographs, memoirs, books, art, personal stories and artifacts, and every item helps us to tell the story of the Jews of Belarus. Our mission is to collect and create a safe long-term preservation space for these precious artifacts. This is a collection in making, one that is currently at risk of being lost forever. I think that such a collection would teach us, and we're looking for partners who will help us to make this collection a reality. This is a Jewish heritage archive just waiting to come to life.
Hello, and welcome back to the second section of the webinar. So on this second session, we will be looking at 4 interesting innovation projects that push the frontiers and are currently working to push the frontiers of the digital preservation and digital heritage. So I'm going to present here a few speakers, and we will start, and please ask Anya to control the presentation. I will jump right into the speakers and ask Anya. Are you there, Anya? So she's probably trying to control it. Yeah, next one.
Thanks, Luis.
Anya is from the Archives of the Republic of Slovenia. She is the chair of the DLM Forum, and she's also involved in the European Commission's e-archiving activity, the initiative that Arpad was talking about. And she will was also participated from all the projects that Arpad was talking that built up into the e-archiving initiative. And she will be presenting e-archiving, what it is and how does it work. So welcome, Anya, and it's great to hear from you again.
Thank you, Luis, for the introduction. And good morning to everyone who's joining the webinar. When Pavel and I had a chat about this presentation, he mentioned that the e-archiving and what we do at the e-archiving initiative is really not well known and understood topic. I would say that's somewhat true for the whole archiving field, but to see how much water does this assumption hold, I decided to ask the smartest bot around, ChatGPT, about it. And while the three of us agreed that e-archiving may not be a widely known topic in all industries and locations, ChatGPT firmly reassured me that the e-archiving is an important and relevant topic in today's digital age, and it's not at all considered obscure. So presentation of who we are and what we do is definitely in order. Let's begin at the beginning. At risk, I will probably overlap with Arpad a little bit here, so bear with me. Original e-Ark is almost a decade old now, and it was a research project that improved the methods and technologies of digital archiving in order to achieve consistency on the Europe-wide scale. The results of this project were then a basis on which e-Ark for All and e-Ark 3 consortiums, together with European Commission's Connecting Europe facility, built and maintained e-archiving building block, which finalized in 2021. Today, the current e-archiving consortium has 5 lead partners, 6 subcontractors, and 15 organizations that are joining via the DLM forum. We range from archives, research and technology institutions, software solution providers, academia, and I think we all have extensive experience with long-term preservation. At the moment, we are 5 months into first 2 years of funding under Digital Europe program with possibility of 2-year-long extensions. So potentially we are looking at the 4 years of financing. This scheme that you're seeing on your screens right now outlines the work structure of the e-archiving initiative and shows rough activity and task distributions. Our effort is divided between 5 key activities: project management, core, capacity building, support desk, and synergy building. Activities of the project management are probably more or less the same as any other project, so let's keep that and talk about the other 4 that have less suggestive names. First, we will take a look at the activities at core, which are, so to speak, the foundation of our business. We maintain and improve existing e-archiving or e-Ark specifications and also creating new ones. Apart from common specifications that define requirements for archival information packages, we also support several content information type specifications, namely specification for digital preservation of geospatial data, 2 for e-health related data, ERMS, and databases. At the moment, we've been working on specification called Engineering 1, and this one will define an approach to digital preservation of 3D modeling data. Part of the core activities is also building knowledge center, whose aim is to keep set of services that provide comprehensive but simple and easily understood set of requirements for information governance. Two archiving services, reference architecture and maturity model, require regular updates by the core team to preserve consistency with the e-archiving components and best practices, as well as to comply with the ever-changing community needs. Reference architecture is a service that can be used to facilitate implementation of OIs in the information system, and it's strongly linked with the e-archiving by design approach. The main goal of this approach is to be proactive in terms of long-term preservation and to support the work process in such a way that a long-term accessibility of the information is taken into account from the moment the information's creation. Such integrated approach to archiving helps to bridge the gap that often exists between the work processes and archiving processes. The reference architecture team works closely together with the Archiving by Design group. Archiving by Design is a body of representatives from national archives that exists within European Commission's European Archivist Group. And this Archiving by Design team is tackling the issue of proactive long-term preservation. So to summarize, reference architecture service helps to mitigate one of the biggest risks at the digital preservation today, and that is loss of information due to obsolescence of format or information system used for the creation of said information. The second service, maturity model, serves as an instrument for organizations to conduct self-assessment and guide them regarding their capability in digital preservation process areas. It helps organizations to identify their strengths and weaknesses in the areas of pre-ingest, ingest, preservation planning, data management, archival storage, and access. Now, development and maintenance of validation testing tools and software libraries related to e-archiving specifications is an ongoing task under core activity. With setting up the framework for validation, conformance, and compliance, we will eventually be able to offer e-archiving seal of conformity with different levels of compliance, beginning with the highest level from common specification for information packages to the specific SIP, AIP, and DIP information package types, down to conformance with content information type specification. And finally, members of the core team are participating in several European and international standardization activities. Activities within capacity building can be divided between training and outreach. Within training, we aim to develop holistic training environment via online webinars and face-to-face training workshops. One of the goals of this activity is to educate additional trainers versed in the fundamentals of e-archiving, who would then be able to train others via a series of specialist modules, such as, let's say, how to develop a content information type specification, what is e-archiving validation, and similar. This task will also provide how-to guides and video resources demonstrating the basic e-archiving processes. To complement this more industry-oriented training, the capacity building team will also develop e-archiving course curriculum aimed at the higher education community. Within the outreach, we aim to organize one general event per year. And apart from that, several online events related to key milestones in developing the e-archiving platform, like presentation of new content information type specification, presentation of e-archiving curriculum, e-archiving conformity seal, and similar. In order to create transnational network of specialists, some subdomain focused events will also be organized. The first one is GeoConference in Ljubljana, which will take place on 8th and 9th of May. And it's aimed at geospecialists and other interested in preservation of geospatial data. Hopefully registration on the archiving web page will be open in a couple of days. Synergy building. This activity aims to build on the synergies with relevant projects within the Digital Europe program, including the former building blocks and also new data spaces. The Synergy team will also maintain already established collaborations with interested parties in the long-term preservation of digital data and set up new ones. The team members actively follow up on updating the eIDAS regulation. After its adoption, the team will continue with its effort to contribute to the development of implementing acts for trusted services, methods for e-signing and validation of e-signatures in long-term preservation will be examined, along with long-term preservation of digitally signed documents using e-signature protocols. We're also connecting the eHealth 1, E-Ark eHealth 1 specification that defines long-term preservation of patient medical records with eHealth digital service infrastructure, and organizing a session related to diversity and complexity of different data sets and use cases in the digital archiving of health data within the DLM Forums members meeting in May. Based on successful implementation that combined e-delivery and e-archiving specifications, at the DG TAXUD, the Synergy building team will promote the use case and encourage the use of interfaces and common components, document pitfalls and caveats, and provide training and support to foster the onboarding of new institutions to the same or similar approaches as we did with DG TAXUD. Last but not the least, the team will strengthen existing and develop new connections with other relevant European data spaces and investigate how e-archiving can be offered as a part of their common service platform. I'd like to conclude this presentation with the plans for re-establishing support desk and onboarding services on our new website within the Digital Europe's program. I've seen a lot of questions about it in the chat. But however, until this is up and running, you're welcome to contact me or any of the consortium member or one of our policy officers, Arpat or Fulgencio, with any question, initiative, opinion you might have, and we will make sure you get a timely response from the most qualified person. That's it for me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anya. I would like to make you a question. So one of the questions I have here is, well, the e-archiving initiative from the European Commission seems to follow a top-down approach where it reach member states and then, well, large public institutions first. But in terms of inclusion, how can small communities or even personal collections, which may have enormous value, use the e-archiving initiative and the services it provides and the guidelines it offers?
Well, I think it could be probably even easier for smaller companies because they are not part of that rigid system that can often rule in the bigger organizations. So they can just go straight ahead to our support desk or onboarding service. They can use software solutions that we provide without worrying that some other software solution is already in place. So yeah, they should just contact us or contact their local archive for help with preservation and do it.
Yes, yeah. So they contact the channels that you've shown. Thank you very much, Anya. And I would like to present you to our second speaker, Karen Bradenberg. She is the metadata strategist at the municipality organization Scaivera. I hope I said it right. And she is also the chair of the Premise EC and also of the DILSIS board. She manages the e-Ark specifications. She is the co-chair of the technical subcommittee of the encoded archival standards, as well as the member of the METS boards. And generally, she is the person I know which knows more about metadata. So very welcoming to Karen, and she will presenting us the presentation about information hand in hand with sustainable long-term digital preservation. So welcome, Karen, and tell us all about this.
Thank you, Louise. Well, J-Ark is the name of the place where I am. So let's see, I'm controlling the screen, the term again, or my title again. And yes, I do know a lot about metadata. So I will today not go into specifically how the specifications work in e-archiving. I will talk a little more general about them, because if we were going to talk about them in specific, we will be here for a couple of days. So bear with me and follow me along on this journey. So we have already heard earlier on today that, yeah, we need to preserve things. We have a moving target. I'm from Sweden. We have rune stones. And if you haven't been in Sweden and looked at them, I recommend that you do it. They have been around for more than 1,000 years, and we can still read them. They are really well preserved. They are made of stone. We have passed letters. We are now into the ones and zeros. This is truly a moving target. And can we just say stop? Do we have someone with the power to say, stop, we need to catch up so we can make sure that we can handle this and that we can preserve everything, take care of it, we can share it? Quite frankly, not. It would be nice, but we are not in that position. The information is actually needed more and more by different types of users. We have already heard about the some of them, like the data spaces. So we do have information flowing around. We have a person at an agency entering information into a system. It might be the public entering information to the same system from a web form. We need to get that information out, and we need to spread it around to, for example, we are exchanging the system. We want to move all my information from my current records management system to a new one. I want to move it to another agency. I want to publish it on the web as open data, or I want to share it with the data space, or someone comes and asks for the data, and that can be anyone. So, and in the sort of final stages, depending on the legislation, I need to send the information to an archive. And then the circle begins again, and from the archive, a consumer asks for the data, another agency asks for the data, and so on. So the small arrows you see here, if I have made the whole picture, you had seen one of those nice linked open data images where you have connections to everywhere. The screen would be filled, but let's keep it on this quotation mark simple level. So how do we make this information move around? Well, we do have a lot of standards. On the left hand, you see standards maintained or standardization bodies. But at the same time, we actually have de facto standards, specification and standards that are being used by a huge number of users, which gives them equal status as the standardization organs specifications. So how do we make this work? Because taking ISO as an example, look at an ISO standard. Is it easy to implement? Do we actually understand them right away? Do we know what we should be doing? We actually don't. We need some common way of understanding them, and actually need some explanations on how we should use them, so we actually can aid each other and make sure that the information we are sharing with everybody is possible to share and to be understood, so that if I send something to someone, they understand what the information is and how they should use it. Well, how they should use it can depend on the solution they are in, but they need to know my information as well. And if I get something back, I need to know what that is. So looking at this moving target, how do we really handle it? We have already heard about it. We have technology changes. Look at the data storage. We had those nice cards with holes in them. We still have places where they are being used, like in a weavery, and we have the history of the computer. I'm not sure that we have saved too many of the abacus calculations, but this is the reality. Things are changing. The data storage ends with the cloud. Was the name just a year ago? People started talking about the saving in the DNA. So the technology will always move forward, even if I sometimes promote the chisel and hammer, because that's really stable. And what we need to do is that we need actually to understand that these changes will happen. It doesn't help that I scream "Hjälp," this is help in Swedish. We need to be aware that all this change, even the consumer's understanding of the information change, we need to be prepared to actually look into that crystal ball and see and think, yes, they need to know this. We have already heard about, yeah, we haven't really looked into the preservation. We need to describe this and this. And that is exactly what we need to do. We need to understand this and make sure that in the early beginning of this session today, or in the whole webinar, we had the question, how long is long? And yeah, look at those rune stones. More than 1,000 years. Fingers crossed our ones and zeros will last more than 1,000 years, because otherwise our history will be lost. So we need to make sure that whatever we do brings the information possible to look at whenever it's needed. So how do we make this information understandable? We have all the standards, and I would recommend starting off in a standard and taking aid of the specifications, like the one from e-archiving, where you have a specification that gives you the requirements. You have a framework for the rules, which eventually will be updated depending on how the different rule frameworks are looking. Some of the rules currently needs to be expressed with a pink fox called schematron, which aids and gives more thoroughly ways of looking at the requirements and rules. But we don't need this alone. We need to see how people have been doing it. We need to get some guidelines or introductions. What is this? Why should I use this? How do I use it? Even if we can't tell you, you take this specification and you do it like this and this in your system, that will never happen, because there are so many systems around. So it's going to be general and talking in general terms on how to do it. And then there is the software providers who will do the implementations in many cases. Or if you have done it, created the software yourself, you will do it yourself. But that's the aid we have, and examples, which is always the tricky part, because example needs to be showing something almost real life, but at the same time, no personal data and everything, so we actually can show it. So a lot of things to think about when we make it understandable, but the specifications aid us there and give us a way of thinking in the same way. So this is a long journey. I'm kicking off in my own journey. It started in 2006. So here we are, almost 20 years later. And I can confirm a lot of things has happened. When I started off with this, I was presented with this. Up on the right, you see the OAS reference model. That's the basis when we talk about e-archiving. How should we think about these information packages that you already have heard about? But we also need to look into the preservation and the description of the different things, entities, objects, whatever we call them. This image is a couple of years old, but it's still relevant. It gives you a clue to how many standards we actually can see and use to describe the things. But this is the standards. We also need to be able to see how we can implement them. So here again, where specifications come from. So this is what I was thrown into in 2006. I started off at the Swedish National Archives, and what we discovered was that we needed to have something making it possible to describe how you transfer information in Sweden in an easy way, in a common way. You see the grayish dots here saying FGS. That's actually förvaltningsgemensamma specifikationer, common specifications in Sweden, in Swedish. How to order and sort data so you can easily transfer it to another system, to what we call in Swedish mellanarkiv, a close by archive, and then to ett slutarkiv, the final archive. It might be the national archives or anything, but where the information, the ownership of the information has ended up with the archive. And at the same time, you need to be able to make this information available following all the regulations. I'm not going into those because then we will be sitting even longer. To as open data, to e-services, and whatever it needs to be. And this is something that started off in 2009. And you have already heard the magic year of 2014. That's when the first J-Ark started. The J-Ark, first J-Ark project, actually took the Swedish specifications and made them being usable in Europe. That means that what we have already heard about the specification is that we wanted to have a common way in Europe to look at this information. How do we transfer it? We have already heard about the 4 boxes on the top being the information packages. And then the long blue lines are the different content information type specifications. And here the thing is, I may be an expert, as Louise said. I know a lot of metadata. I don't know all the metadata. I'm in no way expert in everything. I'm an expert in a lot of things, but here it comes in that to make sure that we have the content information type specifications that we, as we call these, not being the information packages, we need the experts. The ones who know the data needs to be part of creating this. Because of course I can make a specification for whatever, but quite frankly, it's better if the experts do the work. To make sure that you saw there were some gaps in the timeline that has been shown a couple of times earlier. And to avoid the gaps, the DLSys board was created to be the responsible body for the specifications and be the one taking care of the specifications when we don't have an J-Ark around. So being part of this, of the e-archiving, is also the DLSys board, where we have put people responsible for the specifications and making sure that they are there, they are published, they won't vanish, because these are needed for a long, long time. Tagging along on my journey, well, it took a couple of years, but my biggest example is that in 2015, we published the Swedish Common Specification for Information Packages in its first version. A draft was published in 2012. We are here looking about almost a decade ago, and it took some time, but from the beginning, no one really, what is this? This is something strange. What are you doing? And I think what was found with the ChatGPT bot, whatever its name is, this is not a thing that is obscure today. It's really the vendors, after a couple of years here in Sweden, started saying, if you're not using the specifications that comes from the National Archives and the Swedish FGSs, we won't help you, because we don't want to create 10 different ways of exporting data. We want to have one way. And that kind of gives us that magic button that when you press it, you get something out in a wish and with a swoosh. So that's one of the keys also for the vendors, that if we all demand the same export format, which is what it will actually be in the beginning, we need to wait a couple of years until all this is implemented in the systems and that it's there from the beginning. But so far, it's really being, how do I map what I have in my system to this export format that is available and understandable by everybody. So it takes some time, but it's on its way. As I said, we are a little bit ahead here in Sweden, but I hear the same thing from the whole of Europe. The specifications are here, and we can use them, and we can make everything understandable. I need to sniff over these data spaces. We should have data flow, and here is the specifications making it easier. If we sort the data in a specific way, how easy isn't it to then move it around? And everybody can reuse it and implement something that actually reuses the same sort of data. It might be in different languages. So here e-translation comes in, so we can actually translate what we are getting. But if we order everything in the same way, it's easy to do the exchange. So we need to work together. It needs to be experts of the different kinds of data, actually needs to sit down together and say, this is how we do it. And then come over to us in the DILSIS board and e-archiving, and we will together look at how do we put this into an information package. Different ways of doing it, how you package it, if it's just talking about the information package, or if it's also talking about the structure of the data. So it's a big thing. We need to work together. This is not a thing we can do in isolation, because then we will end up with way too many solutions to do the same thing. We need to do it together in a common way. So we can't stop that train. The future comes no matter what. So September 2019, someone was writing something 200 years later. They might be having a big laugh. What did they do? How did they understood information or understand information? So, but still, it needs to be possible for them to look at it. We need to preserve it and take care of it. So my understanding and what I think is that we need to use specifications and common ways of describing the information and preserve it, so it becomes easy for all to access it in the future. How we preserve it, that will be not a thing easy to say for everybody, but there are some guidelines, there are literature available, there are standards for what you should be thinking about. And all of these standards also evolve when the technical stuff evolves, our knowledge of metadata expands. So everything is evolving, and we can't stop the train. We need to work together today because we want to preserve the information for the future. Even if I might think we need to make our own runestone so we actually know that we have something left for the future. But yeah, we need to create the new runestones, the digital ones, so we actually can be seen and known about in the future. And with that, I'm saying thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I have a kind of thinking here about two questions I'd like to pose to you. One, well, you said that we need to reach consensus and get together and define here common ground, and in terms of also to effort to change vendors in the way of they thinking about export. Do you think you seem to point that consensus is, what do you think is blocking consensus to be reached mainly? Because I usually see a lack of consensus of, for example, requirements. Every domain, every country seems to want to do their own thing. And what advices would you give to try to instead of going for their own thing, to always try to first look at the common consensus and what are the forces that are pointing them out from using a standard formats?
I would say the biggest force is actually what we are heard about earlier, the data spaces, the sharing of information. If I try to share information with you, Louise, and I've decided to write a Swedish schema, having our special Swedish letters in the end of the alphabet, and I send it to you, you won't be able to open that. You won't be able to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So the big force, and what we need to think about, is that actually the information needs to be understood by others. It might be today, and it might be in 10 years, 15 years, 100 years. how do we make them common and understandable by all? So we need to look into the standards that are accessible, see if they have a specification on how to order and structure the information. And then we need to look into, if that's not available, we need to look into what's available in Europe or even globally. So it's really looking into and see what can we don't need to invent more wheels. We need to really start thinking about this is actually a common problem we have. And I can always put the information I put into these schemas in my native language.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have the elements being the same, then we can easily transform the information and using e-translation if we don't understand the information itself.
And I guess that you also gain the tools from the community to be easier if you use standards, because then tools will also help you when on that. Another thing that during your presentation reminded me of was e-archiving by design, and specifically one of the requirements, which is the information should be able to be exported from the system. And this makes me think about, well, when institutions order, well, whatever system they have to manage their information or to produce their information, export is many times not a requirement, and export formats are not a requirement. And actually exporting goes against vendor best interests. So what opinion do you have about that, well, disparity?
Yeah, well, quite frankly, it's for vendors, it's both good and bad, because if you have an import format for that common export format, then you actually easy can compete with others.
Mm-hmm.
So you have it easier to reply to a tender. What I see here in Sweden, and that's the only market I really know, is that for us in J-Ark, who are the archiving agency for 36 members, I think it is that they have actually, when they are putting out a tender for a system here, they actually
Mm-hmm.
have archiving as part of the requirements.
Oh, that's amazing.
And there we get the question to aid, so we put in that you need to have these use common specifications, either the Swedish ones or most preferably the European ones, which also open up the market even wider. So I see a shift going on, that you actually archiving is being seen as something that you need to think about when you even buy your system.
Yes.
I'm not following along the archiving by design too thoroughly, since it's not it's the National Archives who are holding in the project. But what I hear is I'm still lacking that they say you need to use specifications for getting things out.
Yes, and then
that's the next step. But they are on their path to finding that out. Okay.
Thank you very much, Karen. And as we are almost a minute late, I would like to introduce the next speaker, Jack O'Sullivan. He's the technical lead for innovation in Preservica, and he comes to talk about standardizing the exchange of digital preservation know-how using preservation action registries. So welcome, Jack, and tell us all about this.
Thank you, Louise. As Louise said, my name is Jack O'Sullivan. I'm the engineering lead for the innovation team at Preservica. And for those of you who don't know Preservica, we're a digital preservation systems vendor. I've been working at Preservica for over a decade in the field of digital preservation, and our product Preservica has been around for significantly longer than that. But what I want to talk to you today about is how we go about sharing the digital preservation knowledge and experience that we have within the digital preservation community, how we make that available to users of all types of digital preservation systems. So the problem that I'm going to talk about is how we go about sharing what we know. I'm going to talk through quickly the approach that we've taken, which is to try and adopt a standardized language for describing this kind of knowledge, to take a look at where we are now, and to think about where we're heading to next. The first thing that I should really point out is that what I'm talking about today isn't just work that we've been doing here at Preservica. I'm going to be talking about the Preservation Action Registries project, which is an inter-organizational effort. So it's being steered by the PAR consortium, and that includes representatives from Artifactual Systems, who are the makers of Archivematica, from JISC, the Open Preservation Foundation, and from us here at Preservica. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? So digital preservation systems perform a number of preservation activities, and typically how you perform these activities, the data that controls that is held in some form of technical registry. And users of these different systems often want to compare notes on what it is they do, or even share their policies and their practices with users from various other systems. And it's difficult to know whether something that you describe in one system is actually the same as something that sounds the same in another system. For example, if you're a Preservica user, you might say, well, we use FFmpeg to migrate videos to MP4, and you might even want to go further and say we recommend that other users do the same. And as a user of Archivematica, you might look at that and say, well, great, Archivematica lets me do that. But how can we be sure that what you're recommending to do is actually the same as what Archivematica lets you do? Are we talking about the same FFmpeg commands? Are we using the same parameters to that tool? Are we using the same version of that tool? Which parts of that actually matter? And if we can confidently talk about what activities we're performing in some detail, then hopefully what we can do is improve the spread of best practice or good practice across the whole community. And that will hopefully lead to improving the quality of file format identification, enable us to build standard approaches to characterization and validation of content, hopefully facilitate the adoption of new tools. And it will create active links between communities to shorten adoption timescales. So you can provide expertise and knowledge directly to the people who need it. You don't need to wait for annual conferences to share that kind of information. And hopefully, if you can take on board what other people have done, you can reduce the repetition of the amount of research that needs to be performed. But the problem is that these technical registries have historically developed independently, and they have different data models, and they work in different ways. So these simplified models of how Preservica and Archivematica have historically worked showed the kind of problem that we have. So we're describing the same activities, but we're using different vocabularies to do that. Some of those things overlap and look like they're the same thing. Some of them are the same thing. Some of them look like the same thing, but aren't. And it's complicated to work out whether what you're saying in one registry is the same as what you're saying in another. And this isn't just linked to or limited to Preservica and Archivematica. All the various different preservation systems will have their own registries and their own languages that are not necessarily compatible with each other. So how have we gone about solving this problem? So what we set out to do was to define a data model that describes what we actually do that we could all understand, and crucially to do that in a way that would hopefully be machine actionable, machine understandable, machine implementable. And I'm not going to go into the details of this, but this is broadly the data model that we've developed. And what we're doing is describing preservation actions, which are in the middle there. And those are the things that we perform. We use tools to perform those. We use parameters to control how the tool performs. Preservation actions have a type, so they might be characterization or migration. And that all takes place against digital content, depending on what type of file it is, so what format it has. And all of these are basically factual statements. We can run this tool in this way against content of this type, and we can expect these kind of outputs. But what we've also introduced is the idea of a business rule that starts to tell us what we actually do or what we actually should do. And using that, we can start to build out digital preservation policies. And we can do that in a machine actionable way. So that opens the door to being able to automatically generate or automatically apply preservation policies to objects in your repository. And because the language that we use to describe these is shared, you can actually take policies that have been developed by other people, bring them into your system and have them run automatically. At least that's the aim for this. And essentially what that does is create a standard language that we can all understand and that all of our technical registries can map to. And that allows us to share information about what we do across systems in a way that we're confident that we're going to be doing the same thing in each system. So where have we got up to in this project? So we've defined an approach and we've been working for the last few years to actually make it a reality. So we've been doing the work to define the schema, we've been developing proof of concepts, and we've actually got some live production implementations now as well. So we've got a conceptual model that is captured by the diagram that I showed you, but that's formally declared in JSON using JSON schemas. And this goes to the point about giving us a machine readable language. It's a machine readable definition of exactly what we mean when we say business rule, preservation action, tool. And because we've used JSON schemas, that also gives us a tool set that enables us to validate these things. So if somebody presents us with a preservation action, we can validate that we have all of the information that we're expecting to be there. We've also developed a number of examples of preservation actions, of business rules, concrete examples written in JSON. There are various levels of detail if you go to have a look at our GitHub page. But each of them should contain sufficient information for you to actually be able to understand and implement what the action or the rule is trying to achieve. And we've got separate GitHub registries for the schema, the code, and these examples. The other key thing that we've developed is an API definition. So having a data model is all very well and good, but if you've got an API, you start to be able to actually manage the transfer of data between systems. And if two different systems are using the same API, that becomes very easy. So the API that we've defined allows us to exchange JSON documents like the one I've just shown and receive them from and send them to registries that have this Power API sitting in front of them. And it's a HTTP-based REST API. So it should be relatively easy to pick up for any developers. So that API is formally declared and documented using a technology called Swagger. And that means we get a YAML file declaring exactly what endpoints should exist, what requests they should accept, how you should parameterize those requests, and what responses should be sent. And the key thing about using something like Swagger is that these documentations can be used to automatically generate client code for you. So developers can get a head start on implementing these APIs by generating some code that will actually call out to these endpoints. And as a side effect, it also gives us a nice way to generate user-friendly documentation, like I'm showing you here. So we've also got some real-world concrete implementations, as I've said. So Preservica has a PAR endpoint on our production systems. And we actually went through the process of rewriting how our technical registry works so that it is actually PAR native. It's not doing a translation. And we've changed how the code that performs preservation actions in the systems works so that it's using this model directly. So our production systems are fully functioning PAR API endpoints, so you can get real PAR data that describes what Preservica is actually doing and capable of doing. And it's a production implementation of client code that can automatically implement these actions. So it's going some way to proving out our use case. We've also been working with some folks at Yale to expose WikiDP's file format information, again, using the PAR data model via a working PAR API. So you can get information from WikiDP out of that system using PAR, transfer it to a PAR compliant endpoint, and augment your registry with the data that's in there. And this is an ongoing project. It's active, and if this sounds interesting to you, you can get involved and help out. So we have a version 1.0 that is tagged and released, and we'll be producing the new roadmap for upcoming versions at a series of monthly meetings that we hold. And if you'd like to contribute, you can raise issues in our GitHub. You can email to the Open Preservation Foundation, and you can get involved by actually attending our meetings and having a say on what you want to see happen. And again, you can ask for an invite from the Open Preservation Foundation for that. So just to summarize, what we're trying to do is to facilitate the exchange of digital preservation knowledge and practice between users of various different systems. We've worked to create a standard description of what actions we need to perform and how we, and a standardized means of exchanging those. We do have real world implementations now, but it is ongoing. We're still working to improve it, and we're always looking for new collaborators in this work. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and ask if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Jack. There are a few questions. First one on is, does Preservica have plans of getting compatible with the e-archiving specifications?
So I know we have been looking at it. It's not part of the work that I'm directly involved in, so I don't know what the status of our plans are around that. That's something I would have to go and ask our product team to answer that.
But do you believe there will be openness towards that?
Yeah, so we have historically considered various data models and supported a lot of metadata standards. So yeah, it's something that I'm sure we'd be open to discussions about.
Okay, thank you. Another question is about, well, the policies you shown seem to be a lot file related, file format related. What about policies that are not file format related, are representation related, metadata related, or even not related to data at all, about controlling staff and controlling other aspects of the preservation?
So that is a good question. PAR is aimed at being a standard for technical registries and technical information. So policies around staff and governance and finance, I don't think is something that we would want to try and consider to build into the system. But some of those things that you mentioned, like representation-based policies, are something that we would consider. So we have done some work at looking at defining digital objects in a slightly more holistic approach. So recognizing that some types of digital content are not just single files, there's multiple parts of content to be considered. And so, yeah, working on how to define what those objects are will lead into how you can then define the preservation actions that you want to take against those, and then you can hopefully build out policy from there. But yeah, it's a technically focused standard.
And a final question is, well, there's a few work about, for example, from Barbara Searman, about several levels of policies. On her model, you'll be considering the policies you are creating control policies, that low-level policies that are defining this format, you execute this thing. But they normally connect to medium and then high-level policies that go up to the kind of mission of the institution. Do you feel it will be possible to have connecting now these control policies top into the connecting them to the up to the mission of the whole institution?
Yeah, so policies like that in that work up to the mission, you're always looking for details of how you can actually implement what the mission says. So the mission will give you a sort of broad outline of what you want to achieve. And as you dig further and further into the details of what that means, you need to be able to write that in increasingly concrete terms and increasingly specific terms. And I think, yeah, PAR is aiming to be at that low level, as you say. It's the way that you actually implement some of these higher level statements, but there will be something that is needed to bridge that gap to say, yeah, this is the high level mission, these are the kinds of things we need to do, and then here's the actual specific implementations of
Yes, thank you very much, Jack.
Thank you.
Pressure has been done to go ahead into the next one, as we are on a tight schedule. So our next and final speakers for this section are the Envision section are Alex Tursky and Esther. Alex is an impressive entrepreneur, and just check his bio on the leaflet, and founder of the Post platforms. And Esther Delouf from Solid Labs, and they are going to tell us if the internet can back up itself, and it seems that Solid has the answer. So welcome, Alex and Esther.
Thank you very much, Luis. And yes, we are presenting today together with Esther from Solid Labs. And I hope that many of you already heard about Solid project. It's the latest invention of Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who invented the web technology. And actually, Solid is not something different from web. It's just a natural continuation of it. Sometimes we call it Web 3. And yes, it was quite fun to work with Esther on this presentation, where we try to explain how data space technologies can help in long-term preservation. And that's why we call it, can the internet backup itself? And yeah, the answer exists. Solid has this answer, and it's extremely simple. And you'll know it in 15 minutes. So let's start. And we decided with Esther that we'll split it, our task in the following way. I'll go through slides, and Esther will cut in with her comments, insights, and also she'll try to compile all your questions so that we can answer them on the fly and make it a live discussion. Okay, let's go. And when we start to prepare the presentation, first of all, I opened the website of the conference and started to read it. And the first phrase was, how long is long-term preservation? And then we start to think, okay, how long is it? Is it 10 years? And yeah, then probably we can handle it, it's no problem. Or is it 30 years? And then I recall that 30 years ago, your data was kept on something like that. And then good question, can you read this diskette now? Well, probably not. But finally, we decided that probably we're talking about 500 years. And you may ask why 500 years? Because from one side, no business, no technology will survive so long, but museums and archives will. And cultural institutions will demand this kind of longevity. So the challenge is to preserve the content for 500 years. And through the whole presentation, I will apply this criteria 500 years to everything we are going to talk about. Okay, our next question, next challenge is, can internet backup itself? And to answer this question, we have to first answer the question, what do we use internet for? And quite obvious, we use it to transfer data. And how reliable is that? I mean, do we have to call to the other side of the planet and tell, well, could you send this file again because it was corrupted, and to hear in return, what did you say? No, we don't do it. We always receive data in very good form because of all these protocols which exist inside internet. And at least first 4 of them make sure that you always get everything not corrupted and in perfect condition. So this is an absolutely reliable system to transfer data. And next question then could be, but can internet store our data? It's a strange question to you, but it's not so strange. Let's say 30 years ago when internet was invented, nobody thought about it because you kept your data on this personal computer. But nowadays, and it was discussed today through the previous presentations, nowadays more and more cultural institutions keep their data in internet, in all kinds of systems. And I'm not talking about archiving technologies. I'm talking about your normal way of operation. Where do you keep your CRM, on Sugar CRM? Where keep your audio guides? Where keep your 3D models? Most of these systems already are based in the clouds. And that's what you have to deal with. So we are not talking about files anymore, like it was just discussed. We are talking about data which is somewhere in proprietary formats or proprietary companies. And may I ask you a question? Will it survive 500 years? Most probably not. None of the systems you'll find in 500 years. Well, so we have a problem because from one side you can keep it on your computer, from the other side you can keep it on internet. Where will you keep your data? Definitely we are going to keep it on somewhere in the cloud, but in which corner of this cloud? And here is where we ask Solid. Well, Esther, you are the closest person to Tim Berners-Lee, and what do you think our guru Syed Tim Berners-Lee would prescribe to our community to answer this question?
That's a very good question, Alex, and I hope you can all hear me. Yes, so like 10 years back, Tim found the solution to this problem, and he basically said, we need to reimagine how we as people and as organizations relate to our own data. And we need to make sure that organizations and people can also store their data on the internet, and then from there on, decide who they want to share this with. So actually, Alex, I think we already have the solution here.
Well, no solution, but let's say image of the solution. And idea is that internet is reliable in transfer of data. It should be as reliable in storage of the data. So if this vision implemented, then we have no issue of long-term preservation at all. But then the question is it just a wishful thinking, or does the solution exist? And the answer is it exists. Let's explore it. And before we provide the answer, we have to dive a little bit into the history of internet. And let's recall good old Web 1, which we had 30 years ago, also invented by Tim Berners-Lee. We had web server on the left, we have web browser on the right, and you can easily read information from any website with your browser. It's a reliable technology. By the way, it can survive and will survive for 500 years without problems. It survived for 30 years. But it's unscalable. If you want to book a hotel in Rome, you have to check the hundreds of websites of hotels, and well, we need something better than that. We need aggregation. And this aggregation came in the form of Web 2, in the form of platforms, Facebook or Booking.com or Uber or audio guide technologies. And we like it because it's very helpful. We put it all together and we get all together. The only problem which came together with these platforms, monopoly of platforms. And this monopoly really started to irritate us. Actually, we don't have our data anymore, and any museum probably now puts data in 10 different systems every day. It's a little bit frustrating. So where this monopoly sits? It sits inside the database inside every system. So solution is very simple, and that's the solution of post-platforms project. We cut data out of platforms with scissors, literally. And if we cut it this way, we return data back to people or to museums if you want. And we returned in the form of good old website. Well, slightly changed. That's why it's called pod. It's also an invention of Tim Berners-Lee. He called pod. And these pods are available for platforms through machine-readable protocol. It's kind of advanced HTTP. It's called Solid, and that's the essence of the Solid project. And if you do something like that, let's forget about technology. Let's see on the consequences. What do we get as a result of this new architecture? Consequences are amazing. First of all, people on the right who use systems, they can change them easily. You can work today on Facebook, tomorrow you can work on LinkedIn, on Instagram, you choose it. So you don't depend on systems. And for those who are on the left who publish, it's also amazing. They just post something and they don't post on Facebook, they just post. And this information immediately picked up by any system on internet. So it makes also big change for platforms themselves, because it's very easy now for any platform to come to the market. You come to the market and as a new platform, and you immediately get access to all pods in the world. And it means that there will be very many new Facebooks or Booking.coms or any other systems, which means competition, and competition is good for us. And there are many more other consequences of this Web3 technology initiated by Solid project. Just to sum it up, if I put it in 3 lines, Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, it means that we take the best from Web 1. We take the idea of web server. You hold your data at your side. And we take the best from Web 2. We keep using platforms exactly like we used them before. The only difference is we do not allow platforms to hold our data because we have pods for this data. And that's a big difference. Platforms become just aggregating browsers. Yes, Esther?
Yes, Alex, maybe for people in the audience who already know about Solid, if you've heard about Solid, you've probably already heard about the left side of the screen, so the storage of the data in the pods, and the right side of the screen, having any app that can view data that's in your pod. But Alex, here you add these platforms in the middle. Can you explain their role a little bit more?
Well, first of all, we like platforms, and millions of people use them, and they would prefer to continue using them. It's first thing. Second reason to keep platforms in between is that if you remove platforms, you have to do it with your browser. Imagine you want to repeat the success of Booking.com, and you cannot put the whole power of Booking.com inside your browser. So platforms are extremely powerful machines which need to work somewhere, and browser is just too weak for that. And by the way, platforms have other reasons to exist here, because ontologies, which we'll have to talk about when we have millions of pods, they develop not only in space, but also in time. The same term 30 years from now will be different. Platforms will play important role in developing this dynamic ontologies, but it's quite professional discussions about linked data then. But platforms have a natural place here, and Solid is a perfect machine-readable protocol. So platforms fit very well. And by the way, it's totally in line with the ideas of International Data Space Association, because these guys love platforms. So in a way, it connects the world of ideas and the world of Solid, which makes a perfect solution. Well, let's move on. So I already answered this question to some extent, that post-platforms idea is between Solid with this idea of personal pods and between ideas with this respect to platform. So it's a perfect combination which has a lot of synergies as a result. Let's review it, because we are moving towards long-term preservation. And where can we use these ports? Of course, not only for people, but also for organizations or for cars or for engine of the car or pump of the engine of the car. We definitely go to the Internet of Things here, and probably we may expect billions of these ports. But let's concentrate on museums. A museum or any cultural institution archive may have a port. And of course, it will be used not only by Facebook and LinkedIn, it will be used by any AdLib system or Google Drive system, or whatever you want. And actually, it will be not up to museum to choose platform to use for their work. It will be up to the employees of museum. So probably in the accounting department, some people prefer to use SAP and others prefer to use Oracle. It doesn't matter. So people in the museum can use any system to access through different interfaces the same port. And yeah.
Yeah, but Alex, if you are all using the same pod, how do you guarantee the interoperability in data formats then, if everyone uses a different format?
It's a great question. And I heard today it was discussed very many times. I think the Solid is the answer, because the difference between pod and website and between Solid and HTTP protocol is that we have linked data inside. Actually, I can imagine that different platforms will want to put their data in their proprietary format to the pod. But as long as it wrapped into the RDF formats of linked data, other platforms will be able to understand. Let me give you an example. Imagine you use in your museum a 3D modeling tool to create a 3D model of something, of the church. You put on your pod, and then Google Earth system will pick it up from there and demonstrate your 3D model of the church on the planet of the Earth. And Google will understand your form because it's linked data. It will interpret the metadata in linked data, understand, okay, that's a photograph, that's 3D, and what format. So Solid is the answer, and I mean, linked data inside will help different platforms to agree on, to understand each other. Of course, it will not go easily. I can imagine a lot of stupid games, finger pointing, whatever. Eventually, we will learn how to do it. So answer is we don't need a holy grail of common format at all, because we can combine museums and car navigation systems. Because if you change your address, TomTom should bring you to this new address, which you change with another system. But we have to teach platforms to understand each other, and we can do it. But it's really good question, Sam. Okay, so now we come to the most important question about 500 years. How is this pod supposed to survive for 500 years? Well, of course, it will be probably in the clouds, and probably we'll put it to some Amazon web service or any other service. But our idea is that Amazon will provide you a contract. And according to this contract, it will be not only one pod at Amazon, it will be another synchronized copy on Azure or another copy on Dropbox. So one contract will assume that you keep your pod in synchronized way on different competitors of Amazon, which means that if 50 years later or 100 years later, Amazon will disappear, you'll not notice it. Your pod will continue to work on Dropbox or Azure, and you continue this way. Because it's Web3 is open standard, you may assume it will last for 500 years. This is our answer to this question about 500 years. And finally, it's not enough just to store your data for 500 years. You need to find it 200 years later. And for that, you will need to have what we call persistent IDs. And the whole system of Web3 data space assumes persistent IDs, not only for cultural heritage, it also will be in industry, and in any other, in travel, etc. But this persistent ID will make sure that the same URL could be used many, many years later. And and that's
Alex. Can you maybe make it a little bit more explicit for the cultural sector? Like, why would a persistent ID be so important?
Well, if you recall that currently any museum keeps data in, let's say, 5-10 different systems. In every system, they have different data space and IDs for the same object. And the good question, is my object number 25 in this system or number 100 in that system? It always confused. But imagine you have one object, the photograph or any scan image or 3D under one ID, and any information system you use exactly the same ID, which means that you can provide references from any movies, scientific articles, books, and you can even ask some platform question, how many scientific articles referred during the last 100 years to my particular photograph? And you get the answer. And it will be never ever broken links, which makes your item quite, solid in a way. Yeah, I use the same word. And also it's a good foundation for intellectual property rights protection, because you know now what to protect. And of course, with a lot of cryptography, which you use in Web3 data space, I didn't speak about, but we really have a lot of there. And you can provide a kind of, provenance for the whole object, and also establish the author's right for the same object, because it's very important 200 years from now to understand who is the actual owner, or is it fake or not fake. So provenance it goes together with the long-term preservation, and we can provide it. Well, so how this future will look like? Very simple. Actually, you'll use exactly the same systems on internet you used before. The only small difference is that all these systems will be just aggregating browsers to the data you keep on your museum or archive port. And so you'll not be worrying anymore. These systems will come and they will go, and you don't care. So with your personal port or organizational port behind all the systems, you don't worry about the systems. And that's how you can reach this 500 years preservation period. Well, now if I keep on reading your website further, the next requirement was to help small organizations, communities, and even personal archives. How can we answer this question? Very easily. We call it, it's kind of not challenge. We call it long tail inclusivity. Usually we talk about big museums and small museums, but what about private collections? What about just, old grandma with her photograph from the middle of 19th century and about her photo? Small museums will definitely enjoy the whole story. They have their photo, it's clear. But when it comes to personal storage, it becomes a little bit more complicated. And this grandma, probably she will get, her pot from a bank, and she will put her photo on Facebook. Facebook will put it immediately on the pot, and then Europeana will pick it up, this photograph, and put to collection of Crimea War immediately. So we definitely can do it. And of course, we'll need a provenance. Well, that's it. And we reviewed with you just 5 outcomes of the whole Web3 data space technology. We didn't even speak about data space. But at the core of all these discoveries is that we disconnect data from platforms and we return data to museums and archives. And that's how it works. And we do it in other industries, in hospitality, in mobile operators, etc. So I hope that culture heritage will enjoy it. So the answer to the question of long-term preservation is that internet is going to keep it itself. I promise it will be simple, and I promise that you'll know it in 15 minutes.
Can we very quickly address one question from Frederik Rosseel in the chat? He asked about the use of Adlib on one of the previous slides. Can you see that question, Alex, and maybe pick up on it?
And what was the question about Adlib? Can you share the link to this?
Frederik says, I might have missed it, but what was the use of Adlib on one of the previous slides?
Adlib was just an example of the system you may use. And for example, 10 years ago, I created another system called Easy Travel Audio Guide System. It doesn't matter. Museums use every day dozens of different information systems. Adlib is just one of examples of them. But point is that in the future, Adlib is supposed to keep data on the museum port. So Adlib becomes just aggregating browser for you, and probably some of your employees will use another system to access the same CMS and put the photograph to the port. So you put the photograph through another system and you see the result in Adlib. And I think we are getting out of time, and but please, Luis, please.
Thank you very much, Alex and Esther, for your wonderful questions. We are going for the break now. After the break, we'll be going for the roundtable questions. So in 5 minutes, I welcome you all back to the roundtable. During the break, we'll be presenting a video of one of our content partners, the Jewish community of Lithuania.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to talk about our successful video archiving project and our recent enrollment in the J-Ark project with the Menorah news show. Our team at the Lithuanian Jewish community has been working tirelessly over the past year to preserve and digitize old archives, photos, and videos, and we're proud to say that we've achieved our goal. I want to start by highlighting the importance of preserving our cultural heritage. Old recordings and videos are not just a collection of moments captured in time, but also serve as valuable sources of information about our past. They give us a glimpse into the way people lived, worked, and interacted with each other, and they can inspire future generations. Our video archiving project started with a small team of dedicated professionals, and we aim to extract videos from the archives of Lithuanian national television. We converted old recordings into digital formats, allowing us to store them in a secure database and make them accessible to a wider audience. We also put great emphasis on ensuring that the videos were of the highest quality possible. Although we faced challenges along the way, such as deteriorated tapes, we were able to restore many of the recordings to their former glory with the help of our experts. This has resulted in a much clearer and more vivid experience for viewers. As we progressed with the project, we realized that our efforts weren't just about preserving old videos but creating a legacy for future generations. We are excited to engage with schools and universities, offering them access to the archives and encouraging them to use the videos in their studies. This will help to ensure that future generations will have access to these important cultural artifacts and documents. In conclusion, our video archiving project has been a great success, and we're excited about the possibilities it offers. We're committed to preserving Jewish heritage for future generations, and we're confident that our contribution will be significant. Thank you for listening.
Hello again. Here we are going to the third session of this intensive day. And we are very happy that a very big majority of you stayed with us till this moment, last session. And if some have to leave, we ask you to fill in this short satisfaction survey, which is offered to you when you are leaving. We would like to know what you think about this event. So in this third and concluding part of today's webinar, you will meet some people that you have already met previously at the open panel. And we have also two new guests that I'm very happy to introduce. The first one is Kerstin Arnold from the Archive Portal Europe Foundation. Kerstin has been working in archives for more than 15 years in very different roles. And now she's managing the archival aggregator in the European aggregators community, and is one of our most experienced members of the community, and as of recently now also a newly elected member of the steering group of the aggregators forum. So congratulations, Kerstin. I'm very happy to see you with us today. And the second participant is Manuel Herranz, the CEO of Pangianic. I partner in the J-Ark project. Manuel has spent many years in the language industry as translator, engineer, project leader, speaker, and entrepreneur. And Pangianic, under his leadership, is one of the leaders of language technology in Europe. Welcome, Manuel. And we are also welcoming the three other participants, Fulgencio, Valentin, and Luis. Welcome to all of you. Thank you. The participants are being added to the panel. So we have had now a long day speaking about heritage and preservation in data spaces. And I would like to start these conversations asking Fulgencio, now that the development of data spaces is accelerating, and we clearly see that it will be the main innovation instrument of Europe when it comes to digital infrastructures in the years to come. My question is what we should expect from data spaces when it comes to preservation, and specifically, why has not e-archiving been designed as a data space? And if that was the decision, how you envision it to be connected to other data spaces in different domains, because obviously all these different domains will need a preservation service.
Hi, the point is that the data spaces are supposed to be sectorial and to help a particular sector or domain of the industry or of the society. E-archiving is not that. E-archiving is not supposed to be, is not meant to be a data space. It's meant to be a set of tools in order to help each and every data space. So for example, it could be the same level or the same sense as EID. So you use EID for every data space and for every person that is accessing the data, but not particularly in a data space. In that sense, I would like to say that e-archiving is not a magic tool in order to have preservation. So in the same sense that there was a question in the chat that what is the software that they can use concerning e-archiving. It's not a magical tool. Preservation is a set of activities that must be done and documented through time. You preserve some data for a year with a well-preserved, with a well-documented procedure and so on, very well done for a year. And then you forget about it, the data will be unusable after 20, 50 years. E-archiving is not a magical tool, but it can help very much in order to preserve the data, and certainly it can help the data spaces. In this case, the data space for cultural heritage, but not only.
But in this case, when will we do this integration between the archiving service and the data space? Because the later we do it, the less chances there will be that it will be integrated smoothly and go right into the design thinking of the data spaces. What is the timing here?
Well, I would say that e-archiving, there was another question about this in the chat. E-archiving can already be applied to any cultural heritage institution. So it could be kind of generic. So it is whatever information they want to store. Particularly, there are some content information specifications in e-archiving that are domain particular. So for example, there is the geodata that was requested and developed by the state archives in Slovenia. Anya knows a lot about that. There was the e-health content specifications that were done by the Norwegian archives and by the GRC of the Commission in Italy. And there are others. And there is another which is for cultural heritage institutions that is coming from the consortium in this iteration of e-archiving. But other than that, it can already be applied. But of course, we cannot push for it. We can advertise, we can promote it, we can help onboarding, but we cannot oblige any cultural heritage institution. It's already there for whomever wants to use them.
Okay, thank you. My next question then is about connection between preservation and Europeana, and Valentin already implied it, but I would actually like to ask Kerstin. Kerstin, you're at the same time a partner in the consortium of Europeana working on the data space for cultural heritage, and you're also managing the aggregator for archives, so you're very much in both worlds. And you explained to me one day that today's approach is looking at data continuum with preservation as one phase of this continuum rather than an end point. So it seems that archives are a part of kind of two continuums today, one which is aimed at publishing with Europeana and aggregators as part of this, and one which is focused at preservation. So, and we have, of course, limited resources, limited attention span. Does it make sense to somehow connect between these two flows or maybe even merge them into one?
Yeah, I think that also comes back to some thoughts that I had while listening to all the interesting presentations throughout the morning already, because I think there already are some connections there, but the sphere that Europeana and the European Aggregators Forum, and therefore also Archives Portal Europe, is currently operating in, is very much kind of looking towards the publication side of things. So the metadata tiers or the content tiers that Valentin mentioned in her presentation are very much looking at what do we need in order to make the data or the content discoverable. And of course, making sure that there are no broken links is essential, but it's different to what digital preservation would be talking about when they talk about accessibility. That is more connected to things that Jack was mentioning in his presentation about file formats and making sure that once we have identified the file format, we can actually have a tool, a software, whatever in order to make it readable. And I think this probably is kind of the verge that we are currently on. So do we connect these both worlds? And it's also relating a little bit to the scope that we see for the data space. So is the data space kind of an extension to what European Initiative is currently doing in terms of the publication side of things, or do we also kind of integrate all the things that are happening before publication or around publication? I think that's a question that we are still exploring. So I don't really have a definite answer to it. But personally, I would very much like to see a kind of a more integrated approach.
Well, I think that we have a very natural person to answer this question in this panel. Valentin, what do you think? What do you think about this wish? And I definitely joined Kirsten after almost having completed the J-Ark project. It sounds very natural that once we engage cultural institutions in this European infrastructure, we will offer them a broader service, which is more not only about publication, but also about preservation.
Yes, but I'm like Kirsten. I mean, I don't have the answer to everything. I mean, I guess in this case there is a question of scope and also priorities and resources we have to engage in those activities. What I think could be the first way of engaging around this, I mean, it's something I was wondering as I was listening to everyone, is whether can the questions we are asking ourselves towards publication of data and reuse of data could in fact help us thinking about preservation as well. So I was thinking, you know, about these questions about what data should we preserve, also in relation to how we make sure that we are inclusive and diverse in this approach, you know, reflecting also the data that are produced by smaller communities, etc. So I was thinking about all the questions we are asking ourselves as we are publishing the data and how they should be reused. So I was just thinking, yeah, in fact, if the conversation couldn't start from this angle to see if the question we are asking ourselves in the current context could help us, in fact, to start thinking about some kind of a strategy on preservation. So yeah, that could be a first angle for integration.
Okay, well, we are very happy to start talking about this and to be the reason for this conversation. But since you're very much in the development of the data space, what do you think would be the main challenge if there is an overall agreement and consensus that this is a good thing to add to the Europeana scope? What is the most difficult thing here?
I think, I mean, probably as usual, the hardest conversation might be more on this consensus, as it was mentioned earlier, like having consensus on the approach we should follow, because then in terms of implementation, I don't think that should cause that much issue. I mean, yeah, I think it's more about agreeing on the practices we are following and the workflows. There could be discussion around the role and responsibilities, especially if we imagine that if preservation is done by another party than the institution itself, I could imagine there could be also discussion around the role and responsibilities of the services that may ensure preservation on behalf of others in this case of this kind of scenarios. But yeah, probably yeah, consensus and agreeing on the workflow, on the process, on the standards is probably, as usual, what will take most of the energy.
Okay, so I take it it's not a technical challenge, it's this consensus building challenge. It's about communication, it's about politics a bit.
But for me, maybe the technical challenge is more than when you start looking at things around scalability and you know the volume of data you have you are confronted with. But I don't think implementation will be the most difficult there. I think it's more around the maintenance and scalability of what needs to be done. And also maybe something that I was also thinking, I mean, could be at the beginning of a slightly different conversation, but it's also, I mean, firstly, I had always in mind a kind of static approach towards preservation. You know, you do it once and it's done forever. But now, as we see that the concept of the data space, it also means that data is changing a lot. You know, the data, it's very fluid, it's very agile. So a lot of data are added on top of other data. So you could argue that also in terms of preservation, do we need also something that is a bit more agile? Because as soon as you have new data added on top of other data, should you also preserve those because they are in context? So I imagine that maybe that could be also a bit of a shift in the way we might conceive this thing, that we might need I mean, you were mentioning a concept like synchronization, etc., but we might need a more agile approach towards preservation as well, if we really want to reflect the reality of what is happening in terms of data publishing.
Thank you. I think this is a wonderful observation. It's definitely, to me, one of the big conclusions of this project and this thinking. But both of you mentioned scale and volume, and I think this is a very natural way to get to the industry representatives on this call, on this panel. So, Manuel, I would like to first ask you. So we already, in the example, this very limited example of the J-Ark project, saw that there is need for services before you preserve, before you publish. And then we developed two services, anonymization and translation, and I'm sure we only started looking at the potential of those, of the integrating of those services in this flow. So I have a question to you, quite an open-ended. First of all, how do you see the role of European SMEs in building of these infrastructures? The data space offers to us and to SMEs much more content and data. Obviously, this is a major change. Is it an opportunity? I assume it's an opportunity. Is it also a threat in some way to European business? What is your take?
Yes, thanks for the, well, and congratulations for the great work. Pangenic is an NLP company. I'm involved into several data projects, and particularly what is taking most of my interest lately is large language models, some of which I've been involved in for several years. So I've heard the word data many times today, and every time I hear the word data, my brain starts to be turned on. People say that data is the new, if data is the new oil of the 21st century, anonymization probably is a currency. And this could open a different conversation that I don't want to get into. But the way, I mean, if you look at events over the last 6 weeks in the development of large language models, the work that we are doing, Europeana, as you mentioned, even SMEs in Europe, is essential to the development of a European alternative to what OpenAI, for example, is producing. There will be 7, 8, no more than 10 very big large language models which utilize our data, the data that Europeana makes available. And that perhaps is a conversation that we must have on how open the data, how open we make data. Of course, we have to make it open. There is a mandate to do that, and it's part of European values. But how open do we make it so other, particularly big tech, benefits from it? I think there is at least a conversation that we must have. Number one. Number two, large tech depends or banks or uses a lot of live data. So the goals are very different to the goals that Europeana has, which is preserving what we have. Again, if data is gold, preserving European past and past data is gold at the power of 2 or the power of 3, because of the insights that can give you. There are issues with searching and discovery, and I think, at least this is my personal opinion, okay, I'm not going to involve the company here, I'm not going to involve Pangeanic here, but search is dead. And I'm not saying that. Microsoft's CEO said it 2 weeks ago when he tweeted that he's going to make Google dance. So one of the areas European SMEs can explore and benefit from is getting together and thinking or collaborating with existing initiatives are happening now. I'm part of one or two to pull together data, preserve data such as this one for knowledge, for the preservation of knowledge, but beyond search engines. If you know what I'm trying to get at, not just discovery of, okay, type a couple of keywords, Google type, and find 6 or 7 results, or 10 or 3 pages of results, but to actually tell the story of the preserved data.
Well, you mentioned European SMEs and get together or join forces in one sentence. How we do that? Now that we have this data space, sounds like an amazing opportunity. How would you not let it go?
The idea of the data space is old already. I'm sorry if I'm provocative here, but it was drafted last year or 2 years ago, and I think the assumptions are too old. It's just too old.
Wow, that's quite a statement we get from this panel.
I'm all in favor of the work done and the mining and the preservation. And again, the work that is being done in European is great, okay? But the assumptions of creating a language data space, the purpose, or at least what I remember from reading the paper, the purpose of the data space is becoming old-fashioned. We need pipelines, and we need alliances with universities and large high computing data centers to benefit from the amount of data that's being put out.
Okay, I think that's very interesting. I think that is a wonderful challenge to keep for all of us to keep thinking about in the context of data spaces after this day. But before we conclude, I would also like to ask Luis. We obviously are, because Luis, you have been and are involved with hands-on development of systems for long-term preservations, and we see now, also Valentin mentioned this, that volumes of data are growing exponentially, and especially now that we are talking about the data spaces as a way to pool resources and to join forces. How do we leverage on the economy of scale here? Can we, as Europe, save on costs when we look at this really with ecosystemic viewpoint rather than looking at specific instances and specific systems? What is the way to adopt this ecosystemic thinking?
Well, I think in part we're already trying to do that, and I think the archiving initiative from the EC at least tries to get a common ground on terms of guidelines and bridging communities into a common understanding. Note that digital preservation, as has been said before, one of the hardest part is getting consensus, and consensus is important not just in terms of the people and the countries that we have, but also consensus in a long-term way, consensus on time, consensus with the future. And And for that, I think talking to each other is an amazing step, and I think we are doing that. Another part is that, well, although countries and big institutions can have the scale enough to care about their content, there are many smaller institutions and even smaller collections that need common platforms to help them and do digital preservation. Note that digital preservation is not a one-step thing, is a periodic and continuous effort. It needs skills, it needs training, and for all of that, it needs people that it's difficult to have in small institutions. And what we have seen is institutions getting together. J-Ark is one amazing example of that, of a common platform for many institutions. And we have seen this in more domain-specific places, being it on countries or being it in specific like digital heritage. And I think this will grow more and more because it's the only way smaller institutions can cope with the digital preservation requirements, and also for the financial and economical requirements of keeping data for a long time.
Thank you, Luis. We are closing soon, just about to finish, but I don't want to close this interesting panel before going the full round and getting back to Fulgencio. Fulgencio, what we hear from this panel is that there is, from different participants, is that there is as much consensus building challenge here as technological or resource related challenge. So it sounds like we really need to think about new models to build consensus in data space domains, across data space domains. How is European Commission going to handle that?
There are several ways in which that can be done. It can be done from top to down or from the bottom up. I usually start my presentation saying that Europeana is one of the most amazing things about Europeana is that it put together 4,000 museums all across the Union, and they all talk the same language. That is the Europeana data model. And that's it. I mean, not even in the European Parliament they can say that. Now, what Luis said is very interesting. Now that is a challenge. We not only have to work on this talk of 4,000 cultural heritage institutions in the past 50 years, but also in the future that is coming, that we need to agree with them. And that is the work of the archivist, and actually everyone is an archivist. We all are archiving our own pictures and our own remains and everything. From the Commission, from the bottom up, is the model is European, as I said. From the top to the bottom, there is this common. I don't remember the support center for the data spaces, and that started just last year. I think in November it was the kickoff, and it will make sure that all the data spaces are understanding each other and that they talk an interoperable language. That is the job that it will be doing. So one thing that didn't happen so far in Europeana, as I said, they managed very well to do from the bottom up, so from the museums up to the initiative, the whole initiative. Now it will be the other way around. So it will be something that is from the top that will be imposed on every single data spaces, so they are all compatible with each other. And the example is very clear. There are other data spaces like tourism. For sure, the data space for cultural heritage will be used as well, the same data or similar data in the data space for tourism.
Thank you, Fulgencio. This is definitely a very interesting space to watch in the coming months and years. So I'm very thankful to all the panelists. We are finishing this panel, and we're finishing this day, this half a day. I would like to, I hope the organizers will put the last slides. And before we close, I would like to make two things. First, I would like to say that, well, J-Ark project is launching its service, and we are inviting heritage organizations, big and small, to experiment with our service, which is connecting European data space for cultural heritage, European data space for cultural heritage, with e-archiving and e-translation services. And while the service is run by Jewish Heritage Network and associated with the Judaic aggregator, we are also very interested, together with Europeana, in use cases and partners who are outside the Jewish domain. So if you see interest in this kind of service, the service of this kind of service, please get in touch with us. And together with the Europeana Foundation, we will consider extending this service to the general audience of institutions. And second, I would just like to remind you these big questions with which we started this day about heritage and preservation and what's in between, and data space, of course. And well, I hope that you got some answers during the day, but I'm sure that we just started answering these questions, and it will become even more interesting in the coming time. So watch this space, follow the work of J-Ark, follow the work of Europeana Data Space for Cultural Heritage, and follow e-archiving. The last thing is to sincerely thank all our speakers and panelists and the amazing Europeana events team who has been behind the scenes, helping to organize, promote, and run this event smoothly. And of course, all of you, the attendees who expressed interest in the subject and spent with us this time. All the best, and we hope to see you soon in our online events.